Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change. Believe it or don't. Some of y'all are having a hard time with the facts, but that's all right. We'll just keep continuing to give them to you because when I say some of you, I mean like 2 or 3. I don't mean like most of you. Most of y'all know what's going on. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on in people's minds. Extremism, black and white thinking. Lack of knowledge or use of the scientific method. Which is something to consider. Scientific method is really important. Even if you doubt science, use the scientific method. Apply it to the science that you doubt. Just assuming that every agency and every media outlet is lying to you, assuming that they're lying to you, isn't really very smart. If you do some research and in your research you figure out that they're lying to you, then that's a different story. That's totally and completely different. But whatever you believe should be based on evidence. Evidence. For which we have an overwhelming avalanche of evidence about climate change. But anyways, we're going to get into this story from The Guardian. I seem to be reading, primarily from The Guardian and the Truth Out. And Truth Out these days seem to be like 90% of the articles I read. This one is from July 11th. Heatwave seems to make man-made climate change real for Americans. The record-breaking high temperatures across much of North America appear to be shaping people's thinking, a survey finds. Well, do tell. The record-breaking high temperatures across much of North America appear to be shaping people's thinking, a survey finds. The warm temperatures that have scorched much of the U.S. appear to be influencing Americans' acceptance of climate change. You don't say. With a new poll finding a record level of public confidence that the world is warming due to human activity. We are funny people, huh? Golly, it's hot. I think that global warming is real. Oh, it's been really cold this winter. That global warming must be fake. Long-running survey of American attitudes to climate change has found that 73% of people now think there is solid evidence of global warming. A further 60% believe that this warming is due, at least in some part, to human influences. Both of these findings are record highs in a twice-yearly survey that has been conducted by the University of Michigan Muhlenberg College since 2008. The latest poll was conducted during May, which was hotter than any May recorded in the contiguous U.S. in 124 years of record keeping. According to the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, eclipsing the 1930s during the Dust Bowl era. There's lots of evidence that contemporary weather is a contributing factor to belief in climate change, said Chris Borick, and it should be, director of the Muhlenberg College Institute of Public Opinion. The Institute of Public Opinion, that's an awesome name. But there are other factors. People are telling us they are experiencing a climate that isn't what they remember in the past, and the evidence itself. Oh, what's really funny is I was watching, so I watch a couple of sites that are like, I watch all kinds of stuff, but I watch a few sites that are like super conspiratorial, just because, I want to just see whatever wild stuff people are talking about. And some of the stuff they say is like, okay, that's maybe in the realm of possibility, and some of the stuff is completely like out there. But anyways, I was watching this one guy, and he's doing a bunch of videos about how strange the weather is. And he's like, everything's manipulated. Like all this stuff, they're making all this stuff happen. What does it mean? What are they, you know, what is this, all this doing? What are they doing to us and all this stuff? And like, but you know, in his video, he's like, this is like no weather pattern I've ever seen before. This is totally bizarre. Like everything's messed up. They're messing with the jet stream, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, to his defense, I'm open-minded about something going on. But the thing, you know, the thing I wanted to tell him and that I haven't told him yet, and I probably will leave a comment, but it probably will be outshouted by climate deniers or, you know, the conspiracy types will probably shout it down. But, you know, what I am going to comment on his channel is, this is climate change, dude. This is called exponential climate change. This is what happens. The science tells us this. All of it is telling us this, that this is what happens when climate change kicks in, when tipping points kick in, and warming and environmental changes go exponential. We are going to start seeing heat waves upon heat waves upon heat waves upon heat waves upon heat waves until people are going to be like, golly, the globe must be warming. This must be global warming. Here we are. Americans are moving to a lot more confident space on this. There remains a yawning ideological divide when it comes to climate change in the US. The survey found that while 90% of Democrats accept there is solid evidence of climate change, only 50% of Republicans feel the same. At least there's 50%. I mean, geez. And that's interesting. Those are interesting numbers, right? 90% of Democrats, nearly all, and half of Republicans. So that's a pretty overwhelming majority. However, Boric said that the messaging from those who deny or obfuscate climate change has shifted away from outright rejection of the issue while rejection of temperature data. While Donald Trump has previously called climate change bullshit and a Chinese-inspired hoax, he has rarely spoken of the issue while president, apart from framing action to address it as economically costly. It's interesting in itself. He absolutely knows that it's real. The talking points have turned more to cost to mitigate climate change rather than deny its existence. Boric said, that said, if you want one factor that influences your view on climate change, it's party affiliation. Age, race, and gender don't even come close. The hot temperatures have persisted in much of the country since the May survey, with Los Angeles hitting a monthly overnight record of 79 Fahrenheit on July 7th. Chino, near Los Angeles, saw a record temperature of 120 Fahrenheit, 48.9 C, while Death Valley in California reached 125.6 Fahrenheit, or 52 C, on the 8th of July. About 80 million Americans have been placed under heat warnings in recent weeks, with cities such as Denver, Colorado, and Cheyenne, Wyoming, both experiencing record temperatures. The heat has been fierce on the U.S. East Coast and Canada too. About 70 deaths have been blamed upon a punishing heat wave experienced in and around Montreal, with further deaths recorded in New York and Pennsylvania due to high temperatures. A string of warm days in New York City helped trigger a return to smog-like conditions on July 2nd, when the temperature in the city reached 95 Fahrenheit or 35 C. Researchers who flew a light aircraft taking measurements over hazy New York were astonished to find that the ozone concentration was 150 parts per billion. That far exceeds the Environmental Protection Agency's 8-hour average ozone health standard of 70. Can you say double? Over double. The high ozone readings have continued, with preliminary data for Tuesday showing 85 parts per billion in New York. Ground level ozone is created when pollutants react to intense sunlight, potentially causing haze or smog. This can cause serious health problems and even death for people who are elderly, sick, or who have respiratory conditions. This is a disturbingly high level. We were very surprised at the results, said Russell Dickerson, professor at the University of Maryland's Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Science. The sky was very gray. It reminded me of Beijing. It was like what New York used to be like before it cleaned itself up. Overall, air quality in the U.S. has improved markedly in recent decades following the introduction of federal clean air rules. Ozone levels have remained stubbornly high in New York, however. We are trying to work out why this is, but the recent high level could well be because of the hot, stagnant weather with weak winds. Dickerson said, "It's a public health concern. I'd certainly advise people to stay indoors during the hottest part of the day." All right, people waking up. Finally, if not, if not right at the end. And of course, you know, as things get worse, people will just, you know, blame it on, you know, everything but what it is. Those arguments will ramp up too, I'm sure. It's the pole shift. It's the, you know, the core of the Earth is getting hotter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is from Desdemona Despair, the blog, from May 30th, 2018, all the way back to May 30th. Atmospheric greenhouse gases continue inexorable rise. 2017 was sixth consecutive year. CO2 rose by 2 parts per million or more. NOAA's annual greenhouse gas index, which tracks the warming influence of long-lived greenhouse gases, has increased by 41% from 1990 to 2017, up 1% from 2016, with most of that attributable to rising carbon dioxide levels, according to NOAA climate scientists. The greenhouse gas index is based on precise measurements of gases in the atmosphere, which are collected from a network of sites around the globe and analyzed at NOAA's Earth System Research Lab in Boulder, Colorado. The index is proportional to the change in the direct climate warming influence, also known as climate forcing, exerted by 5 primary greenhouse gases since the onset of the Industrial Revolution. The greenhouse gas index is based on highly accurate measurements and long-established principles of physics, so it tells us how we are raising the amount of heat trapped in the atmosphere right now, said James Butler, director of NOAA's Global Monitoring Division. NOAA scientists introduced the annual greenhouse gas index in 2006 as a way to help policymakers, educators, and the public understand the influence exerted by greenhouse gas levels over time. Called the AGGI for short, it is updated each spring when air samples from all over the globe for the previous year have been obtained and analyzed. Must drink more coffee. Oh Lord. The dog is back after a long vacation. 5 primary greenhouse gases are tracked by AGGI. The index tracks 5 primary gases: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, 2 chlorofluorocarbons that were banned by the Montreal Protocol because they damaged Earth's protective ozone layer. These 5 primary greenhouse gases account for about 96% of the increased climate warming influence since 1750. 15 secondary greenhouse gases, also tracked by the AGGI, account for the remaining 4%. Scientists who created the AGGI assigned a value of 0 to the year 1750, marking the onset of the Industrial Revolution. Analysis of air trapped in ice and snow in Antarctica by NOAA and others demonstrate that after this date, atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations departed from a relatively stable 280 parts per million observed during the previous 10,000 years, climbing to 354 parts per million in 1990 and 405 parts per million by the end of 2017. Since 1750, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has risen 46%. In April 2018, CO2 levels at NOAA's Mauna Loa Baseline Atmospheric Observatory averaged 410 parts per million. An AGGI value of 1 was assigned to the year 1990, which was the baseline year of the Kyoto Protocol. Hold on one second. Alrighty, where was I? An AGGI value of 1 was assigned to the year 1990, which was the baseline year of the Kyoto Protocol, an international treaty calling for the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. In 2016, the AGGI was 1.40. In 2017, the AGGI rose to a value of 1.40. Carbon dioxide, or CO2, is by far the most important greenhouse gas in both total amount and rate of increase, and is responsible for 80% of the increased warming influence captured by the AGGI since 1990. Excuse me. During 2017, NOAA's Global Greenhouse Gas Reference Network measurements showed the concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere rose by 2.3 parts per million, following record increases of 2.9 parts per million in 2016 and 2015. This is the 6th consecutive year CO2 rose by 2 parts per million or more. Prior to 2012, back-to-back annual increases of 2 parts per million or greater occurred only twice. The direct warming influence exerted by all 5 primary and 15 secondary gases measured by AGGI are equivalent to the warming influence of 493. The warming influence of 493 parts per million of CO2. So that's where we're at with all the gases combined. We're actually at 500. And I'm sure that's probably conservative. One of the many climate change indicators, the Greenhouse Gas Index, is one of the numerous indicators tracked by NOAA during 2017 that demonstrate how the Earth's climate is warming. The globally averaged annual temperature during 2017 was third warmest in NOAA's 138-year global temperature record, behind 2016 and 2015. Those were El Nino years, yes. Each of the 5 of the warmest years have occurred since 2010. Each of the 10 warmest years have occurred in the past 20 years. All 18 years of the 21st century rank among the 19 warmest on record. Record warmth was observed across parts of the Western and Central Pacific Ocean, Western Indian Ocean, Southern South America, and the southwestern contiguous US, and scattered across parts of the Northern Atlantic Ocean, Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Asia. For the contiguous US, 2017 was also the 3rd warmest year since the data began to be recorded in 1895, coming in behind 2012. 2016 was the 21st consecutive warmer than average year for the US. Fly flew right in my eye. The 5 warmest years on record for the contiguous US have all occurred since 2006. For the 3rd consecutive year, every one of the contiguous US and Alaska had an above average annual temperature. During 2017, Texas experienced its warmest winter on record. California and Nevada experienced the warmest summer in 123 years. While Arizona, New Mexico, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut all experienced the highest average fall temperatures on record. During 2017, the maximum extent of Arctic sea ice set a record low for the 3rd straight year. Think on that one. Greenhouse gases trap heat. It's that simple, Butler said. AGGI is a single number that shows how much extra heat the atmosphere is able to trap every year. So there's some graphs, all going up, up, up. Except for chlorofluorocarbons seem to be plateaued or going down slightly. Weekly data are used to create a smoothed north-south latitude profile from which global average is calculated. Okay, I'm not really going to get into the rest of the I don't think I'm going to get into the rest of this because I'm going to link it below and you guys can check it out. I'm just trying to see if there's some highlights I can pick out of here before I get off this. From 1999 to 2006, the atmospheric CH4 methane burden was nearly constant, but since 2007, globally average CH4 has been increasing again. Causes for the increase during 2007-2008 included warm temperatures in the Arctic. Yeah. But methane has increased almost to almost triple the level of what it was at a baseline, pre-industrial baseline. It's about 2.5 times higher. So have fun with that. Moving on to Truth Out, I've been wanting to read this article, and for whatever reason, I just haven't got around to it. But this is from Darja Mail, his climate dispatch from last week, July 16th. I really try to read these every time they come out. They're just a good overview of what's going on. A recent mountaineering trip found two friends and myself venturing into the Central Cascade Mountains of Washington State. The approach to our climb meant we had to take a ferry 40 miles up the 55-mile-long Lake Chelan to Lucerne Village on its western banks, then venture up into the mountains from there. When we returned to Lucerne after our climb to catch the ferry back, I took note of the U.S. Forest Service sign with information about the remediation work at Holden Mine, which we'd seen 9 miles up a dirt road to the trailhead we had used to begin our approach hike. Propaganda on the sign claimed that the Holden Mine remediation was cleaning up the past to improve the future. That's a great slogan. I confidently use the term propaganda because this is exactly what this is. The sign went on to tell of the covering up of waste rock and mill tailings, because over the several past decades, these piles have been exposed to rain, snow melt, and groundwater, creating acidic water runoff with high concentrations of aluminum, zinc, iron, cadmium, and copper. The impacted runoff entered Railroad Creek and degraded water quality and aquatic habitat downstream from the site. After reading it, I turned around and looked at the brilliant blue waters of Lake Chelan, glistening in the early afternoon sun. This lake, the third deepest in the United States, at well over 1,000 feet, with several hundred feet of its deepest reaches even lower than sea level, is the primary water source for a massive amount of farming in central Washington, and hundreds of thousands of people annually use it for fishing and recreation. Western recreation. The lake's water is toxic. Lake Chelan is yet another wound that the white colonialist mentality has gouged into the earth. But as profound as this wound is, it pales in comparison to the ongoing and worsening impacts of anthropogenic climate disruption. 2 new studies investigating corn and vegetables have warned of an increasing risk of food shocks around the world, along with malnutrition. If ACD continues unchecked, which by all accounts it will, given the governmental refusal to even discuss the actions necessary for mitigation, both studies were published in the prestigious Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences and showed how ACD will increase the risk of simultaneous crop failures across the planet's largest corn-growing regions, as well as sapping nutrients from critical vegetables. For example, an increase of 4 degrees Celsius, which is essentially the current trajectory we are on to reach by 2100, could cut U.S. corn production nearly in half. Or more than that, let's just say. Meanwhile, the likelihood of simultaneous crop failures for the 4 biggest corn exporters, US, China, Brazil, Argentina, suffering yield losses of 10% or greater, increases from 7% at 2C warming to 86% at 4C. Again, I'm going to say that, between 2 and 3C, we're probably suffering those kinds of losses already. Another study warns of how ACD already poses a serious threat to the nutritional value of crops and a lack of action could well have major global implications for both food security and global health. The same study showed the global crop yields could be reduced by nearly 1/3 with a 4C temperature increase. But the food crisis is already current because drying wells and sinking land at the heart of the most productive farmland in the U.S., the Central Valley of California, are an indication that we are watching the collapse of this once bountiful area. Large portions of the San Joaquin Valley have already sunk nearly 30 feet since the 1920s, with some areas having dropped a staggering 3 feet over just the last 2 years. All of this is a result of farmers' relentless pumping of groundwater to offset the lack of snowpack and rainfall, both of which stem largely from ACD. It is important to note that the groundwater the farmers are using accounts for more than 30 to 60% of the water that all Californians use each year, depending on how much rain and snow the state gets. The U.S. Geological Survey stated that the pumping and resultant sinking of the San Joaquin Valley is one of the single largest alterations of the planet's land surface attributed to mankind. And I really quickly wanted to say something about, I don't remember who posted this, but we had a little conversation about this plan. I had no idea this was happening, and I'm going to see if I can do some more research on it and maybe read y'all an article about it, but it's wild. But there's, he basically linked a video to this plan to create this huge inland sea in California that's going to desalinize the water. They're going to pump water from the coast into this huge inland sea. It's going to desalinate the water, and then they're going to basically fill Lake Mead back up. And they better hurry, because basically Lake Mead is supposed to be at critical levels that will impact Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Los Angeles by 2021. So, like, if they don't do this real fast, basically 3 major cities are going to have a huge water crisis on their hands in 3 years or less, or 2 years or less. So it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time before all these cities, before all these cities are impacted by this this huge problem. It's just a matter of how quickly it happens. It's going to happen. How quickly it's going to happen, we don't know. But if they're planning on building this huge sea, and if they actually have plans and blueprints and all that kind of stuff, I don't know. I mean, A, I hope it works, and B, I hope they're doing it quickly. Or if you live in any one of these cities, let that be a warning. A very big warning, a very big flashing red light. Another sign of the dramatic changes besetting the planet comes from the Arctic, where a cyclone became one of the most powerful on record. The fact that it occurred in June was also noteworthy, as historically these storms don't normally begin to hit the Arctic until late summer. Its impacts on what is left of the ever-shrinking sea ice are, of course, deleterious. Another recent report illustrates how what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. The loss of Arctic sea ice could well cook the tropics by changing critical ocean currents and altering wind patterns, which will, of course, cause dramatic changes across the entire planet. Look out your window. Better yet, go outside and feel what is happening. By early July, cities across the globe set all-time high temperature records, while no single weather event can be attributed solely to ACD. It has been well known for decades that now that all these phenomena are being driven in part and mostly are largely driven by ACD. Nearly 1 billion people across South Asia are at a risk of seeing their already desperate plight worsen. According to a recent World Bank report, the report pins the cause on increasing temperatures and precipitation changes stemming from ACD. If major changes are not made to current global emission rates, baobab trees that have lived for millennia are common throughout sub-Saharan Africa and now rapidly dying off. The scientists are pointing to ACD as the cause. A recent report showed that of the 13 oldest baobab trees, 4 have died in just the last dozen years, and 5 others are on their way out, given that they have already lost their oldest stems. A very disconcerting study came out of the Northwestern University and has warned that even slight increases in temperature could lead to the extinction of bees across the U.S. Southwest in the very near future. Over a 2-year period, the study simulated and predicted warmer future climate, and the results are shocking. 35% of the bees died the first year, 70% died the second year. Good Lord. Adding insult to injury, another recent report warned of something we've known for years now, that warming temperatures could increase the spread of bark beetles, which are well known for how effectively they decimate forests. Meanwhile, Atlantic puffins, which were nearly decimated by hunters about a century ago, had made a comeback thanks to a protection program run by the National Audubon Society. But now, according to a recent report, they are likely on their way out again due to ACD impacts. Speaking of bees, there's no pollination happening in my yard. We have other pollinators, but they just don't seem to be doing anything. My garden is suffering due to lack of pollination. I actually self-pollinated the habaneros that I'm growing. And I'm going to have to do the same with a couple of other plants or try to figure out, but my zucchini don't have any female flowers. They only have male flowers. And I don't know, maybe that's another problem. I'm trying to figure it out. Basic high school physics shows us that as the atmosphere continues to warm, it can hold more moisture. Hence, we should expect greater severity of rain events due to ACD. Recent events in Japan provide an example of this, where record rainfall caused flooding and landslides that have led to at least 155 deaths, with dozens still missing at the time of writing. The flip side of this phenomenon is that there are longer periods between these rain events, which brings drought. In the U.S., the Rio Grande River, the fourth longest river in the country, is vanishing before our eyes. Authorities recently warned that the river likely won't make it out of Colorado into New Mexico this summer, let alone further down into Texas or Mexico. This means that farmers in the already drought-prone region will be struggling with their crops through a summer of extreme drought. Over in Iraq, ACD-fueled drought, coupled with upstream countries damming the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, is creating crisis for farmers. This is causing even more of Iraq to turn into desert, and the future for farmers there is dismal. The oceans are continuing to warm as they absorb the majority of the heat humans are generating in the atmosphere. The giant North Pacific blob, a massive area of warming water that occurred from 2014 to 16, is still having major impacts on Alaskan fisheries. The state's famous Copper River red salmon are currently in decline, and a dismal salmon run forced the state to carry out an unprecedented shutdown of fisheries at a popular dip netting area there. To make matters worse, Alaska also had to shut down several king salmon fishing areas in Susitna Valley. One of the main reasons, again, being the ACD-fueled blob. Warming waters in the Gulf of Mexico are causing fish there to change their geographic distribution, phenomenon happening around the world that has been mentioned in several other climate dispatches. A fascinating study was recently published showing that regarding sea level rise, rising bedrock below the West Antarctic ice sheet could actually slow down what was expected to be a catastrophic collapse of that ice sheet. The study revealed how as the ice melts, it releases its weight load from the bedrock, which then rises. Projections show that this could rise as much as 8 meters in the coming century, which could potentially protect the ice from the warm seawater that has been melting it from below. The author of the study said that this could buy the world a few extra decades to prepare for what is still eventually to come with sea level rise. However, a significant amount of sea level rise is already set in motion, given thermal expansion of ocean waters, ongoing melting in Greenland, and the rest of the cryosphere and other factors. What did Roger Hallam say? Done and dusted. The melting of the ice caps is done and dusted, meaning it's happening, it's going to happen, and it's already locked in. Case in point, watch a 4-mile-long iceberg carve off the Helheim Glacier in late June. An event where half-mile-long high columns of ice broke free and spun onto their backs, releasing 10 billion tons of ice into the ocean. A recently released study shows that coral reefs will be overwhelmed by rising oceans, given that they cannot grow fast enough to keep up with rising sea levels. Reefs only grow in certain water depths, so as waters rise, the coral simply cannot cope. In Bangladesh, ongoing rising sea levels coupled with recurrent flooding is causing an increase in homelessness. And now a recent report shows the growing unpredictability of shifting rainfall patterns is further complicating the people's plight. Another report on the ramifications of sea level rise in the U.S. warned that more than 150,000 homes and businesses could face more frequent high tide flooding within 15 years. The number of homes and businesses impacted by this could well double by 2045. It is worth noting that these projections are not based on worst-case sea level rise estimates, which have thus far themselves not been keeping pace with reality. The same report warned that Charleston, South Carolina is one of the riskier places to live on the coast of the Southeast, as within the next 3 decades, as many as 8,000 homes in Charleston County could flood at least 26 times if seas rise just 2 feet. Also singled out in the report was Texas, where more than 5,500 homes along coastal areas of that state could be flooded by rising sea levels by 2030. As a harbinger of further planetary warming, a recent study showed that the Barents Sea in the Arctic Ocean is continuing to warm dramatically, which means it could soon transition from being a cold Arctic area to a warmer Atlantic-dominated climate regime, hence shifting the climate for the entire region. Global implications. The study shows that the Barents Sea is likely on track to become ice-free year-round in the near future. Fire. Summer is now in full swing, and so is the fire season, along with record temperatures. Wildfires have been blazing across the western U.S. for weeks now. By July 4th, thousands of people had already been forced to evacuate from their homes due to encroaching fires, as more than 60 large active fires were present, mostly across the already drought-ridden western states. Colorado had already had its 3rd largest fire in its history, which was still expanding beyond the already 147 square miles that it had burned, roughly 200 miles southwest of Denver. Also in early July, someone in the Rocky Mountains described a tsunami of flames, and one of the fires burning in the Rockies had already burned an area larger than the city limits of Denver and was only 5% contained. Wildfires in California this summer have already scorched more than 2 times the 5-year average of the land burned this year, and that is only as of July 1st. Things are so bad across the western U.S. that officials have opted for a rare shutting down of national forests. This is due to widespread exceptional drought, record warm temperatures, and the high danger of more fires. Thus far, national forests and parks in New Mexico and Arizona have been shut down, along with the San Juan National Forest in southwestern Colorado. I'm going to say that's, frightening, and also, thank God they're doing that. Seriously, just need to shut those places down and keep everyone out, keep people out. I'm sorry, y'all. We've given up our right to take in nature wherever we want to and crush it under our boot as we do that. For most of you reaching this dispatch, you don't need science to tell you how much warmer it is outside than it used to be. One look at these global heat maps from early July showing temperature departures from normal tell the story. A major heat wave swept across most of the U.S., setting records across the country, while in China, a heat wave torched Shanghai, Beijing, and other cities, forcing the country to speed up its natural gas imports to meet energy demand to run air conditioners. Around that time, the UK reported the hottest temperatures it has ever recorded for June, while in Scotland, Science Center. In Alaska, just before July 4th, Anchorage set a new heat record when the city saw 80 degrees Fahrenheit. At least 33 people died from the heat across southern Quebec, Canada, as the province baked under extreme temperatures, causing Montreal to open pools and air-conditioned spaces to the general public in hopes of preventing more deaths. Across the U.S., the number of days with above normal temperatures has been trending upward, with 92% of the 244 cities analyzed in a recent study having more summer days with above normal temperatures than half a century earlier. Denial in reality. As usual, the denialism in the fossil fuel-funded GOP is on parade. Four Republican senators recently called to halt funding for an ACD education program, calling the program propaganda. Swerving back into reality, a recent study dispelled again the myth about natural gas being a clean energy source. The report showed that natural gas could warm the planet as much as coal does in the short term. Because what is natural gas? It's methane. That's because the main ingredient, the potent greenhouse gas methane, has been leaking from oil and gas facilities at far higher rates than governmental regulators claim. An article in Science set up the study. A new study finds that in the United States, such leaks have nearly doubled the climate impact of natural gas, causing warming on par with carbon dioxide emitting coal plants for 2 decades. Methane doesn't persist in the atmosphere as long as CO2 does, but while it does, its warming effect is much stronger. And what does it break down into, boys and girls? CO2. You know things are really bad when even the Pope is warning that unless governments take ACD seriously, the Earth will be nothing more than rubble and refuse. To underscore everything in this month's dispatch, an international team of researchers from 17 countries recently published their findings in Nature Geoscience, which showed that global temperatures could eventually double those that have been predicted by climate modeling. According to their findings, sea levels could rise by 6 meters or more, even if the world meets the 2°C maximum temperature rise level set by the Paris Climate Agreement. Thank you, Darja Mail. Thank you all for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. That's all the time I have for this today. I hope to be back tomorrow with another video. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.